Hi, my name is Heer and this is my Ethnic Studies final reflection video. I am in section A08. I am 18 years old and I am from India. My pronouns are she, her. My positionality is shaped by my identity as a woman who comes from a post colonial country that was under British rule for nearly 200 years. Growing up in India, I have witnessed how colonial legacies continue to influence systems of power, privilege, and inequality. My awareness of these dynamics has informed my understanding of how race, class, and ethnicity intersect to shape people's lived experiences globally. This perspective shapes my engagement with this course and my analysis of how systematic oppression, exploitation, and racial hierarchies operate. My first central argument is how Asian immigrants were exploited under racial capitalism in California and Hawaii. So, from the reading, we can see that the author explains capital in California and Hawaii could impose harsher conditions on Asian immigrants than it could on Europeans. This was partly a product of the ideological trappings of imperialism, which enabled Westerners to see people of color as inferiors who deserved no better. Asian immigrants were denied access to land, education, and citizenship, making it difficult for them to fight back against their exploitation. Employers took advantage of this power imbalance, paying Asian workers very low wages for back-breaking labor while denying them the opportunity to improve their situation. As a result, they were easier to exploit than the Europeans. We can see that the economic inequality is often tied to racial injustice and exclusion. Let's look at some examples. The first example is from the reading itself. Asian workers could be deported or denied entry if they spoke out or tried to move up in society. This shows how fear of deportation kept Asian workers powerless and trapped in harsh conditions, protecting profits for employers. Example 2 is taken from the lecture. Laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act 1882 barred Asians from entering the US and denied them citizenship. By keeping Asians as outsiders, these laws ensured they stayed cheap and exploitable workers without rights or protection. Example 3 is from the Sasaki reading. Portuguese workers in Hawaii were classified as white to increase the white population for political goals. In Hawaii, Portuguese workers were initially racialized as cheap labor to sustain the plantation economy, much like the Asian immigrants. However, over time, they were strategically repositioned as white to increase the white population for political purposes and to align with the white supremacy. This shift in racial categorization allowed the Portuguese to gain social and political privileges that were previously reserved only for the whites. The second central argument is de facto status crimes. From the reading, the quote is a de facto status crime does not refer to illegal activity. Rather, it refers to others' perception that a person of certain status is certain to commit future crimes and may well have already committed crimes unwitnessed. It is premised upon bodies perceived to be criminal. When conduct is only criminalized and penalized when committed by a person who occupies a legally vulnerable racialized status, it is essentially a de facto status crime. De facto status crimes are about labeling people as criminals based on their identity rather than their actions. It highlights how society and legal system criminalize certain groups simply because of their race, ethnicity, or perceived status. This concept shows how racial systems are used to justify discrimination, making it clear that justice is not applied equally. Let's look at some examples. Example 1 is from the reading itself. In Rancho Penasquitos, teenagers brutally attacked elderly Mexican workers, assuming they were undocumented and thus illegal. Their victims' perceived status made them targets, while attackers received light punishment despite committing violent hate crimes. This shows how being seen as illegal made the victims vulnerable to violence and stripped of legal and moral protection even when they were innocent. Example 2 is taken from the reading itself. The exception clause in the 13th Amendment allowed slavery as punishment for a crime, leading to criminalization of black freedom after Civil War. Systems like the Black Codes tied black identity to criminality, perpetuating racial control. This example connects to the de facto status crimes by showing how black people were treated as inherently criminal due to their racialized status. Example 3 is taken from the Almaguer reading. White settlers in California often committed violent acts against Mexicans and Native Americans without fear of legal consequences. Laws like the Foreign Miners Tax were specifically designed to penalize non white groups economically and socially, creating an environment where white settlers were insulated from legal scrutiny. This example connects the central argument because it shows how non white groups were criminalized based on their identity and status and not on their actions. The legal system reinforced racial hierarchy, allowing white settlers to act with impunity while racial minorities were systematically oppressed. The violence against the Mexicans and Native Americans was not only tolerated but legally supported by laws like the Foreign Miners Tax, which specifically targeted racialized communities. Impact. I am deeply tied to my Sindhi background, a Hindu community shaped by the trauma and resilience of displacement during the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. My great grandfather, who once ran a thriving cotton business in Pakistan, was forced to leave everything behind, his home, his business, and his community and rebuild a life from nothing in India. Growing up hearing these stories from my family made me acutely aware of what it means to lose everything because of forces beyond your control. This personal history made the course topics like settler colonialism feel very real to me. I saw connections between my family's experience of being uprooted and the experiences of indigenous people in North America who lost their land and homes to settlers. Settler colonialism doesn't just involve taking land, it erases identities and displaces entire communities. Learning about how indigenous people in North America were forced off their lands reminded me of my family's experience during partition. Like Native people, my community had to rebuild their lives while dealing with the loss of their home and identity. This course has helped me see that the settler colonialism isn't just a historical event, its effects continue to shape communities today. It's motivated me to think crucially about these systems and how I can take a stand for justice and equity in my life.